What if the most expensive and dangerous weapon in human history was built with money that no one could trace? For over 2 years during World War II, the United States funneled billions of dollars into a project so secret, not even the vice president knew about it. It was buried under layers of deception, disguised in bureaucratic paperwork, hidden from Congress, and shielded from the public. When it was finally revealed, the world had changed forever, and the financial system that allowed it to happen had already ensured it could happen again. This is the story of how the United States financed the atomic bomb, a $2 billion secret that rewrote the rules of government secrecy, budgeting, and power. And it's a story that still echoes today in the shadows of trillion-dollar defense budgets, black projects, and the mysterious line items no one seems able to explain. Let's unravel the web. In 1939, the world stood on the edge of disaster. Hitler had invaded Poland, war had begun in Europe, and physicists were starting to realize something terrifying. A bomb could be built by splitting the atom. This idea wasn't just science fiction. Albert Einstein and physicist Leo Szilard warned President Franklin D. Roosevelt in a letter that the Nazis might develop such a weapon first. That letter, and the fear it stoked, set into motion what would become the Manhattan Project. But building a bomb that could release the energy of the atom wasn't just a scientific challenge. It was a logistical and financial nightmare. No such project had ever existed. It required the construction of entire cities, vast industrial facilities, and the world's greatest scientific minds working under intense secrecy. And it needed money, lots of it. But how do you pay for something so enormous without tipping off your enemies or your own citizens? That was the first problem. The second was that Congress held the power of the purse, and in theory, every dollar spent by the federal government had to be accounted for. Unless it didn't. The US federal budget was already ballooning under the pressure of war. In 1939, total federal expenditures were around $9 billion. By 1944, that number had risen to over $90 billion, a tenfold increase. In that chaos of spending, the atomic bomb budget could be buried. But even then, $2 billion was no small sum. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $30 billion today. So how did they hide it? The answer lies in a combination of clever misdirection, executive power, and bureaucratic opacity. The Manhattan Project officially began in 1942 under the direction of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. To keep it secret, it was given a deliberately bland name: the Manhattan Engineer District. No mention of bombs, atoms, or physics. General Leslie Groves, a ruthless, detail-obsessed military engineer, was put in charge. He knew secrecy wasn't just about security. It was about money. Groves worked directly with President Roosevelt and a handful of trusted officials to secure funding without ever going through traditional budget channels. They used discretionary defense spending, buried the costs in vague line items, and distributed contracts through seemingly unrelated agencies. At Oak Ridge, Tennessee and Hanford, Washington, entire towns were built under the guise of war production. Thousands of workers, many of them unaware of the project's true purpose, were hired. Huge sums flowed through private corporations like DuPont and Union Carbide. The atomic bomb was being built in plain sight. But on paper, it didn't exist. Even Vice President Harry Truman didn't know about the Manhattan Project until weeks before he became president. How was that possible? Because the financial structure of the project had been carefully designed to bypass traditional oversight. The War Department created a financial black box, what we would today call a black budget. The Department of War would request funding for large, ambiguous categories like research and development or engineering services. These funds would then be diverted internally to the Manhattan Project. Auditors might have noticed the spikes in spending, but the country was at war, and the books were filled with inconsistencies. No one looked too closely. It worked. From 1942 to 1945, the United States spent nearly $2 billion, about 1–2% of all wartime federal spending, on a project virtually no one outside the inner circle knew existed. But it couldn't last forever. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another on Nagasaki. The war ended soon after, and the secret ended with it. Reporters, politicians, and the public were stunned, not just by the power of the bomb, but by the fact that such a massive project had been completely hidden. The fallout wasn't just radioactive. It was financial, political, and ethical. Congress was furious. Hearings were held. How had billions been spent without their knowledge? Was this legal? Was it democratic? But the war had been won. Roosevelt was dead. Truman, now president, defended the project as a necessary wartime measure. The era of the black budget had begun, and it didn't stop. In fact, it grew. The same financial architecture used to build the atomic bomb became a template for future projects, especially in the intelligence and defense sectors. The CIA, created in 1947, was granted broad funding authority. Its budget was, and remains, classified. The Department of Defense developed Special Access Programs, or SAPs, which are so secret that even members of Congress often don't know what they fund. Today, these programs make up a significant portion of the U.S. defense budget. In 2021, the U.S. government acknowledged spending over $60 billion annually on classified military programs. That's more than the entire defense budgets of most countries. And that's just what we know. Modern black budgets are buried in the same way Manhattan Project funds were, hidden in general categories, spread across agencies, masked in contracts. Even advanced auditing tools often hit dead ends. The secrecy is no longer just about bombs. It's about cyber warfare, surveillance programs, artificial intelligence, space-based weapons, and more. But here's the question. If $2 billion could be spent in secret 80 years ago, what could $60 billion hide today? Here are 3 takeaways from this story. First, money is the enabler of secrecy. Without financial opacity, the Manhattan Project would have been exposed before it was completed. Budgetary transparency is more than good governance. It's a safeguard against unchecked power. Second, the systems we create in emergencies often outlast the crisis. The financial mechanisms built to win World War II didn't disappear. They evolved. Today's black budgets owe their existence to decisions made in the 1940s. Third, secrecy has costs beyond money. Ethical decisions, accountability, even democracy itself are threatened when vast projects are hidden from public view. The public never voted for the atomic bomb. They didn't even know it was being built. Here's the warning. We are entering a new era of powerful technologies. AI, biotechnology, quantum computing, many of which are already being developed under government secrecy. The financial structures that enabled the atomic bomb are still in place, and they're bigger than ever. Will we repeat the past, or will we demand accountability? That's up to us. If this story challenged what you thought you knew about history, secrecy, and power, then don't stop here. Ask questions. Follow the money. And if you found this valuable, share it. Subscribe. Because in a world built on hidden budgets, the truth is the rarest currency of all.